You're tuned into the
Counterflow
Podcast, home of dissident voices,
unapproved opinions.
But you gotta get ready.
You ready?
Now here's your host
and humble narrator,
Buck Johnson. Let's go.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Lockhart, Texas. Ortho-bros. Is that a bad word? Is that a pejorative? Is it descriptive? We're going to talk about domesticating the Ortho-bros. My guest is Protodeacon Patrick Mitchell, who has a very, very impressive resume that you'll hear up front here in the beginning of this conversation. I should give credit to our friend of the show, of course, Jim Jatras, who sort of put this together. We did a talk on this exact subject at the Ludwell Fellowship Conference, and I thought, we only have 30 minutes there. We have to do at least an hour on this. We do just over an hour, I believe, here. And so that's what this one is, because Father Patrick has a lot to say, and I think this topic's one that's needed to be addressed, because I think there's a lot of unfair things thrown about using that term ortho-bro, and then there maybe is some accurate things. And so we're diving into all of the above. So without further ado, Protodeacon Patrick Mitchell, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here.
Glad that you're here. So due to the the wonders, let's say, of technology, this will be released after we have a similar chat here in Virginia this coming weekend. But as it were, we've already had that discussion in Virginia when this drops. And the title is Domesticating the Ortho-bros. Before we jump into that, I'd like you to give sort of an intro on who you are, what you do, things that my audience will find pertinent per this discussion, and then we can get into it.
All right. I'm a retired writer. I worked for a number of years as a journalist and then as a speechwriter. Started out actually in the Army. But I now just spend time working for the church. I've been Orthodox 35 years, converted in 1990. I was raised in the Church of Christ. I liked the tradition. It just didn't seem to be enough. And then I was stationed in Turkey in the Army and saw those Byzantine ruins and began to ask questions about that church. And very quickly, once I started asking them, looking around, I found the Orthodox Church and was quite immediately sold there. And moved around a bit in terms of starting out in an OCA church and then moving to Houston and being with an Antiochian church and coming back to the OCA, and then joining RoCor in 2012. After being ordained, I was ordained at the cathedral here in Washington, D.C., in the OCA. But then came to RoCor. I've been RoCor ever since. We have a great parish, St. John the Baptist, Russian Orthodox Cathedral here in D.C. Just the best parish I've been a part of, really. Lots of priests, lots of deacons, lots of great people. And I have done my own theological work. I have a PhD in theology from the University of Winchester in England. Also, Masters of Orthodox Studies from the University of Winchester. My BA was in English literature. And I've written several books. The ninth, actually, is just been published this week. I may show it on the screen here. This is the first copy I've got. I had to buy it offline myself. I don't have the author's copies yet, but it's just out. And it's entitled Christ as Truth, Truth as Christ, Why the Ancients Chose Christ, Why We Must Also. And I really wrote this book 20 years ago. I wrote it when my kids were in college. I knew that they'd go away to college and might run into some college professor who would destroy their faith, just somebody who's polished with years of experience making undergrads feel bad for believing in God. And didn't want that to happen. And so I wrote them the most compelling case I could for believing in Christ from the standpoint of what it means to believe in truth. Here in D.C., I worked as a reporter for a couple of newspapers, mostly for Investors Business Daily. I was the Washington bureau chief for Investors Business Daily, wrote mainly about politics and foreign policy, mostly foreign policy. But in writing about that and in writing about politics, you quickly come to realize that a lot of people in politics, in the media, and corporations don't really believe much in the truth. They don't really feel obligated to tell the truth or to respect it in any way. And yet, of course, as a Christian, it's kind of a big deal for us. Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And so I wrote it for that purpose. Just been published, as I say. It's something to give to your sons or daughters before they go to college, or to give to parishioners who are maybe going off to college, or just catechumens, people who are still being schooled in it, or anybody else. Actually, I think everybody could benefit from this book. If it doesn't improve your understanding of the gospel, it may improve your presentation of the gospel to other people, giving a different way of sort of approaching things there. So it's the one book I've written that I would say everybody ought to read. All the other books, it's like, well, you might not need to read it, but this is the one I would say, read this book. It's a great book. It's only $15. You can get it off Amazon. As I say, it's just been published, and we're just beginning to do some of the promotion for it. But great that after all these years, I was finally able to get around to finishing it. I was put off from finishing it. I'd been working on it for some years. Was returning to it, trying to get it done. But the last year in particular, when I had other books to do and had those published. One about women in the military, or two about women in the military years ago. But more recently, my own doctoral dissertation was published as Origins, Revenge, the Greek and Hebrew Roots of Christian Thinking on Male and Female. And that was published in 2021. And also my master's thesis, which was on deaconesses. It's entitled The Disappearing Deaconess, and it was published in 2021 also. And I've been speaking about that issue, those issues, in interviews and at conferences. I've also been talking recently about church-state relations, because I've written on that as well. And in fact, I've also written a book about political theory that's been used to teach politics at Yale and Catholic University of America, maybe some other places. That was a while ago. And so I was busy doing those things and didn't do this book. And I couldn't really do it until this year because for the past several years, my wife was very sick and did indeed fall asleep in the Lord last October. So I'm a widower now after 40 years of marriage. I've raised 3 children of my own. They are all married Orthodox. They all now have kids. They're all now in church every week. I, in a sense, couldn't be happier, except that, of course, my wife's not around to enjoy this good life that God has given us. But that's a similar thing. And I do catechism, a crucial thing for the top that we'll discuss. At the cathedral here in D.C., I have been teaching catechism for probably 6 or 7 years. I've seen my classes grow enormously just since COVID, really. I was picking up before then. We were picking up a lot more people coming, but then with COVID, at the end of COVID, people just started coming out of the woodworks. I used to do it in person. I liked it. There's so much that you get from being in the same room with somebody. You get to know them, and they linger afterwards sometimes to ask questions, and there's just a sociality to it that's just very important, very human. I have, however, recently shifted to doing the catechism online, because more people can participate. I do have people participating from other cities who couldn't be there otherwise. DC is a busy town. It's sometimes difficult to get someplace after rush hour or during rush hour. And so I've gone to that, and I'll continue doing that. I have a 14-week program that I do, some of it which is in this book, the new book. I borrowed from it. I read passages. I've always been doing this since it's been in existence for a while, but not published. Or read passages, in particular the passages that have to do with the incarnation, what it means to believe that Christ is both fully God and fully man, how important that is. And that's one of the key selling points, I think, of this book, is that it will explain some things that, of course, we teach, we believe as Orthodox Christians, but they're sometimes may not understand why it's so important to say both fully God and fully man, why all of the ecumenical councils were essentially about insisting on Christ being fully God and fully man. I also, in one chapter, in the last chapter, I actually also compare Christianity with other religions, three other religions, Islam, Buddhism, and Judaism, and their regard for truth. And the fact of it is they don't value it nearly as highly as Christianity does. And that, I think, will be very interesting. Typically, of course, you might be, somebody might catechize you into the faith, but he might not tell you much about Islam or much about Buddhism or much about Judaism. We tend to sort of avoid those topics because it's controversial. And may have been somewhat controversial in this book, but it's very well documented, and you'll see if you get a chance to read it. Catechizing people of all ages, both sexes. I'm seeing more women, but actually more men overall. Sure. Although the last several classes have also involved several women as well. And they range from teenagers still in high school to retirees. And some of them, many of them, oftentimes now have had no religion. Some have been Muslim or Buddhist and are coming to us. We have better answers, and we have a better, more beautiful way to worship. And people are waking up to the need, and so they're coming to the Orthodox Church in ways they never have since the 4th century. Really, I don't know that any place in terms of converting a society simply by evangelism. Of course, we have nations that have been converted by rulers and evangelists. But in terms of the faith actually growing up within a culture that's actually very hostile to it already, I don't know that the church has really seen kind of this way of growth since for a long time. And of course, it is making changes. It will change the church in terms of bringing in new people, and just in terms of the ethnic or cultural character. And that's, of course, what concerns some people with the Ortho-bros, these young men who are coming into the church. So,
Well, you led me right into it. First, let me ask you this really quick before we do get into that. For those listening who are coming to the church or are new or catechumens or not sure the different hierarchical labels, what is the duty of a protodeacon?
It's mainly just a senior deacon. And so he does exactly what deacons do. If you're a protodeacon, you've been a deacon probably for a few years. They expect you to know some things. Mainly, they expect you to know pretty much all that a deacon should know. But especially, they expect you to be able to serve hierarchical services, to be familiar with. Of course, you know what you do when a bishop's there, because there are a lot of different additional things that we do in the presence of a bishop. So that's really sort of the main requirement for it, in a sense. Otherwise, it's a lot of other jurisdictions would just say deacon, and generally, in RoCor, no, we may say deacon. We refer to identify myself as a deacon sometimes, but the formal name would be protodeacon. RoCor actually pretty much deacons are just referred to as father, just in conversation, which is probably not standard in some of the other jurisdictions. They might refer to him as deacon or father deacon or what. RoCor, we just call father. But of course, like deacons, we don't do nearly as much as priests do. We don't bless. We don't perform any sacrament on our own. We assist in doing those things. So it's not nearly as demanding a job as being a priest. And truly, I'm amazed at how much priests do.
Yes, me too. Yes.
And I make a point in some of my other books, my doctoral dissertation, and also the talks that I've been giving recently, and some articles, that really what sets the clergy apart from the laity is that the clergy are actually committed to giving their lives for the flock. Just as since the husband is supposed to love his wife and give his life for it. St. Paul says that a husband is to love his wife as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. And so it's that self-giving on the part of the clergy in caring that for the whole flock, to which the flock responds with thanksgiving, but the flock doesn't have that responsibility The average Christian, the layman, doesn't have that responsibility to really live for the sake of the church. We all have a responsibility to live for others, but it depends upon the others that God calls our way. Our own families, of course, or anyone else that we may come upon, like the Good Samaritan comes upon a man in need and is able to minister to him, become self-giving in that sense. And that really is the basis of my understanding of male and female. And I relate it all in my other works to the Trinity, to the Father and the Son in particular. Because if you want to understand male and female, you don't look at male and female and then look for that in God. Instead, you look at God, and then you look for what's divine in God, how the Father and the Son relate. And you look then to that in men and women, male and female, husband and wife. And there, what you find when you read the Gospels, between the two of them, the Father and the Son, all the giving is done by the Father, and all the thanking is done by the Son. Not once is it said that the Father thanks the Son, and not once is it said that the Son gives anything to the Father except thanks. And so that sort of defines their relationship. That's how they are one. They are one because the Father has given his very being to the Son. So that gift of existence is the basis of their equality, but also the basis of their order, because they do relate in different ways to each other. And the same is true of the man and the woman being from the man as the Son is from the Father. The man then having the responsibility to continue giving to the woman, and the woman having the responsibility to serve the man as Christ serves the Father, and as the church serves Christ, because the relationship there is the same thing. The Christ doing the self-giving as the head of the church. The word head in 1 Corinthians 11, in a sense, means source. And the fathers speak of it that way. It means that the woman comes from the man as Christ comes from God, or the Son comes from the Father. And that role of being the source of something means that you're sharing your being with him. So that's how to understand male and female, but it's also how to understand clergy and laity, how to understand parents and children, and also rulers and their people. In the Christian sense, the head is always the self-giving head, the one who lives for the whole. And the response to that is thanksgiving, quite Christian. That's why our service is called Eucharist, because what we're doing ultimately and relating to God is relating to God in thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. We've got a new sponsor. It is Perfect Spiral Capital. This is the infinity banking concept. Break free from the system. Perfect Spiral Capital helps you build wealth on your terms outside of the control of the corporate banking cartel and the state-manipulated markets. Invest like a dissident, a true dissident. Take ownership of your financial future with strategies designed for those who refuse to be cogs in the machine. No handouts, no bailouts, just real results. Opt out, build wealth. The state inflates your savings away while Wall Street rigs the game. You guys know this. Perfect Spiral Capital helps you stack real assets and create lasting independence. Go to perfectspiralcapital.com/counterflow and get a special offer for fans of this show. Again, that's perfectspiralcapital.com/counterflow. The Ortho-bro, you've already used the term here. Sometimes it's used, I think, as a pejorative. Sometimes it's just a descriptor, I would say. I know I've been referred to as that many times, and sometimes in hit pieces, and then sometimes I think jokingly, sort of. How would you describe that term, or what does Ortho-bro describe? Let's say.
I suppose the popular understanding is the gung ho, typically young male who comes into the church and just hasn't quite become acculturated in some ways, and can be very bold about things, may dress differently, may look differently, and have very traditional opinions. And I think that's what the concern is among some people, obviously, is that much of the alarm that's been raised, probably the ones who've used the term, is from the people you might call the ortho woke. They know that, of course, the bros are not woke, and the bros typically are pretty anti-woke and very bold about it, and they're coming to the church because it's not woke. And of course, that concerns the ortho-woke. It's going to make the church more conservative. People are going to be, or the Orthodox themselves will probably, as a result, need to pay a little more attention to some of their own traditions, like women covering their heads in church, things like that. At the same time, there are people who just look upon converts as, well, they're not quite like us. And that's true of all converts, really. It's, in a sense, the same old cradle convert concern that, you bring people in and they haven't had the inheritance that those of us who've been Orthodox for a while have. And the interesting thing, too, is that some of the concern here for these new converts is among old converts. My generation, people who've been Orthodox for decades, not cradle, weren't raised with it. And when we came in, yes, we were oftentimes suspected of Protestantism, sometimes Catholicism is, being too Catholic in certain ways. And tell you the truth, I would have been identified as an Ortho-bro had the term been around in the 1990s there, because, I had the zeal of a convert. And I was a writer, and I like to hold forth on issues there. Fortunately, there was not the internet around, so I didn't get myself into trouble too much. Maybe locally, but not nationally, not internationally. That's the problem with the internet, is you're talking to the world. Well,
yes.
What can you say to the whole world?
Yes.
And of course, there's a record of it. Thank God there's not a record of everything that I said back then. But you learn over time, and I think I did. You mature. You're still not cradle, or you're still not the same kind of person that already has been in church for a while. So there will be some changes, and of course, a lot of that is simply maturity, people coming in. But those are the two main concerns, I think. And I think it's very unfortunate that people speak disparagingly of the Ortho-bros. They do get into trouble sometimes with being too bold and too extreme and too fanatical, and sometimes just plain wrong about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what we need to do, is just tame them a little bit, to just teach them a little respect for things. But you don't want to completely squelch the zeal of a convert.
Right.
It's only natural that someone coming in, having found the pearl of great price, would want to share it with others. And so you can hardly blame them for doing it.
I think I've heard priests say this. I think Father Turbo first said it to me. We don't stamp out and squelch certain negative spiritual energy, we redirect it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a challenge here. And I think also a term often associated with Ortho-bros, you alluded to a while ago, is online Ortho-bros, online orthodoxy. Maybe there would still be some angst amongst certain demographics within a small parish, had there been, like you might have gone through no internet at all. But I think sort of the phenomenon has blossomed because online orthodoxy. But of course, many of us have found orthodoxy because of the internet and online. And so do you see that as something we need to redirect certain, let's say, zealous energy rather than just stamp it out?
Oh, yes. The energy, the zeal, it's a good thing. There just needs to be some prudence, some restraint, some self-control. And that's true of all of us. And young men, of course, oftentimes have that energy. And of course, part of the role of a man is to be public, is to be the leader, the head, to do these things. That's why clergy are all male. And so it comes natural to a man to sort of want to take charge and be the leader and be the father, be the one imparting the truth to others there. It's just that, of course, when you're young, you don't just probably don't know as much as you will when you're older, and maybe haven't learned to control your own zeal and maybe getting into things that you shouldn't. And I haven't, to tell you the truth, when it comes to the young converts there, I don't see many that fit the stereotype of the Ortho-bros. And I don't know whether that's because I'm in D.C., and in D.C., especially at a downtown cathedral there, in D.C. you get a different kind of person. A lot of times, the people who they're here for the government, they're oftentimes very well educated. It's a different mentality than you might find elsewhere. And so we're not getting a lot of people who really sort of have that, what would be called an Ortho-bro. Young men, and very traditional young men, but actually rather mild-mannered in so many ways, and almost too mild-mannered in many cases. The younger generation is not like my generation. My generation was still fairly traditional in terms of the way a man was expected to behave. This younger generation, it seems, have really been raised to think that they don't dare assert themselves, especially against women. To take the lead, presume to be the leader in anything. They're actually rather timid when it comes to dealing with women, or just socially in general.
Yes.
And actually, part of growing up is getting over in a sense, the shyness, and as a man, for growing up and then becoming to take your place. That's a normal part of maturity for men, always has been. But in the current generation, because we've just legislated penalties for men asserting themselves and just have discouraged it in various ways, it seems to be even more of a problem, that they really have a hard time defending themselves, or just being manly, just being confident, showing the confidence. And of course, when you're coming into a new culture, a new church, obviously you may not feel terribly confident because it's new to you and you're still learning what to do and that's part of it. But that's really almost a greater danger, or not. It's not really a danger, but the more common problem that I see with some young men coming into the church. I suppose some of them have, some of them do. I have had a few, one or two or three converts who've come in with some rather extreme ideas that definitely are not consistent with what the Orthodox Church teaches. And they, of course, need to be schooled on that. One in particular was a fellow who was very much into an extreme libertarianism. And I'm sympathetic to libertarianism in many ways. As I mentioned, I wrote a book about political theory, which is basically descriptive political theory, just explaining the different perspectives that people take and why they think the way they do and why they make some friends and not other friends. And two of those are actually sort of libertarian. One I called individualist, and the other I called paleo-libertarians, which is what they call themselves.
That's what I used to call myself.
Yes,
actually.
Yes. Well, and I have a lot of great friends in that corner. And it's I share a lot of perspective there. It's the more conservative and the more Christian version, and the individualists are the more left of center folks.
Yes.
And the difference between them is because the paleo-libertarians are mainly focused on government, and they want a minimal government, but they believe in archy. They believe in a social order. They believe in God, typically. Whereas the individualists don't really, they're not just against government. They're just out for themselves, and they don't really believe in God, and they don't like any of those moral restraints that come with government or that come with church. And as a result, since they all are pretty much individualists, concerned about their own individuality, they tend they can compromise their own principles when it's to their advantage. That's a point I make in the book.
Yes.
But the others, the paleo-libertarians, yes, a lot of devout Christians in there, but you can be extreme about that. You can believe that you can, as this fellow did, just didn't believe what the church has always taught about, church and state, that we need restraint by government. We need government. And we're to respect government, even when it's our enemy. It does some good, and we're to, as I often say, we're to cooperate with the church in the doing of good and resist the church, cooperate with the state in the doing of good and resists the state in the doing of evil. That's something that some Ortho-bros might come in with. Some come in with rather some come in plainly declaring themselves monarchists. I wish they wouldn't, because we don't have any monarchs. We don't have any kings right now. We have elected leaders, and when they're good, yes, I'd like them to stay around a lot longer and not be limited in a sense to maybe 2 terms or what. I'm not talking about anybody in particular here in the United States, but a lot of countries where they do have a good leader who's able to lead and he does well for the country. If he stays around for 20 years, that's good for that country. You don't have to call him a monarch. All countries are ultimately headed by a monarch for a time at least. But all monarchs actually also depend upon popular support. So you just can't roll by yourself. There are theoretical problems with you talk about monarchy. It's not. You inevitably end up assuming certain things about monarchy that are Western, that involve royal blood or divine right, or the feudal system, and that's not all really necessary. In writing on this, I looked to the Byzantine experience, and the Byzantines had monarchs, but they also deposed monarchs, and sometimes that has to be done. And nobody did it by simply divine right or royal blood. People might fall into that way of thinking, but nevertheless, that's not actually Christian teaching. So sometimes Ortho-bros need to be disabused of that sort of characterization. The other thing is race, because I've not seen much of this, not least in terms of the people who come to me for catechizing. But I know it is an issue for some. Because, of course, race is an issue politically in the United States. And Europe and lots of other places. And partly it's culture, of course, but some people do fall into thinking that the culture is just embedded in the DNA. And so, there's just some people of a different race that are just so different that they really need to be treated very differently. And that's a danger. That even when recognizing that sometimes the race issue is, as we've handled it wrong for decades. The country has handled it wrong for a long time, and it's now producing more resentment among people of different races. But certainly as a Christian, you have to be able to understand, as I make the point in the book here, is that we live for the truth and not the tribe. That our tribe is the tribe of faith in Christ. And that's really the only tribe that matters, the only earthly tribe that matters. There's something to be said for, of course, shared culture, shared history, less so shared genetics, because that's something that doesn't really matter ultimately. You can be raised in a culture and be obviously genetically different in appearance and what, but still very culturally Russian or American or whatever. And so that's something that sometimes we need to encourage people to be a little more careful about. Send the wrong signals there.
You are speaking to a lot of people in my audience right now, especially with that. I was, before this podcast was as it is now, I was an atheist, sadly enough, and I was strict. We called it anarcho-capitalist, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And
Meetings, yes, and Murray Rothbard.
Yes, Murray Rothbard, Lou Rockwell, yes.
Sat at dinner with Murray Rothbard.
You did?
When he gave his famous Breaking the Clock speech in 1992.
Wow.
At the John Randolph Club meeting. He was here in D.C. And Rothbard's friend took me with him. And he knew these people. And I knew of them, but did not know them. But I found myself sitting at the same table with Murray Rothbard and Lou Rockwell.
My goodness.
And Sam Francis. And so...
Wow.
Yeah. It was great.
Lou has been on this, not as Counterflow, prior to Counterflow. He was on my show a few times.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and he's in my book, 8 Ways. It's called the Book of Politics, 8 Ways to Run the Country. And
okay.
it's still available, actually. But yes, on the libertarians, he's sort of like the key, one of the key features of that. And
Yes.
Rothbard provides, from his Breaking the Clock speech, provides a little epigram at the beginning of the chapter. Those.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm very familiar, and I'm very sympathetic to that too. But
Okay, well then let me ask you. I no longer consider myself. I don't use that as a title. I'm an Orthodox Christian. I don't have a political title, so I've dumped that.
Actually,
I've done an episode, at least one, if not more, basically the libertarian-to-Orthodox pipeline, because that was a thing, and it still is a thing. I have had, luckily, and it's not my fault, it's by the grace of God, people sort of follow my journey with this show, and they said, one of my producers was hardcore ANCAP, and he said, you started talking about orthodoxy, and I thought you lost your damn mind. And now he and his family are baptized Orthodox Christians. So it's happened a lot. And then, of course, the monarchy thing, there's a lot of people that went through, let's say, Curtis Yarvin and a lot of his political writings. What are the things we need to work on for those of us that come from this ANCAP, paleo-libertarian, Curtis Yarvin, sort of Mencius Moldbug, monarchy, right-wing, alt-right, whatever you want to call it, to now the Orthodox Church? What are some pitfalls that we need to avoid, or some clothing that, let's say, we need to remove?
do you mean literal clothing, or
no? I'm trying to use that. Yeah.
Well, the name is that in the same way. I write this book called 8 Ways, and people would sort of peg me as a paleo-conservative, which is right next to paleo-libertarian. The book explains the difference between the two.
Paul Gottfried in there mentioned, maybe?
No, he reviewed it. I left Paul out. Like, I know Paul, and Paul actually published an early version of this theory in a journal that he edited sometime. But I know Paul's thinking, and it's a little more peculiar, more just a little too narrow for the broader picture that I was painting of these 8 ways. And that within them, you'll find these different little sort of well-defined. In a sense, that's it. His view is very well defined, whereas I was painting a sort of broader brush.
Fair.
Okay. Various thinkers there. I left out some other people too that and they were glad. They were glad I didn't peg them, because I don't feel like I could be pegged either. When you reach a certain deeper understanding of things, you're a little harder to just categorize.
Yes.
Generally, yes, it would be what I call the upper right, which is where the paleocons are. But the paleocons have often typically been very sort of neo-Confederate. And even though I'm a son of the South, born in Nashville, Tennessee, and I would always, sympathies there. Nevertheless, I've never been terribly into, the lost cause, in a sense. And it's when you do understand things better, when you take the church's understanding and its experience from the Byzantines, it means it's a little harder just to sort of adopt a label that you could put on. Generally, I would say I'm conservative. Certainly, I'm traditional. I'm a man of the right, absolutely, because the left is definitionally wrong.
Yes,
it's about rebellion, basically, and that's where in the scheme that I draw, the individualist libertarians are on the left, as are several other people, and the paleocons or theocons are also on the right. The book's well worth reading, and I hope to that 8 ways. I hope to actually do a new edition, the After Trump edition, I think I'll call it. And now that I've gotten this new book out, I can get to work on 8 ways again. But it is based upon a sound Orthodox theory of personal relations, of government relations, a distinction between the use of force and the recognition of rank, or the idea that, yes, you owe your being to somebody, and so you owe some respect to that somebody. This is fundamental to life. And then you have the issue of the use of force, and that's something that comes in with the fall, and that's where government comes in. And all these different perspectives differ on their regard. I analyze them in terms of their regard for the use of force and the recognition of rank. And some of them are for both, and some of them are against both, and some of them are for one and against the other, and then to varying degrees, because you can, the scale, it's a circle, and you can go out far from the center. Or in the center, you have populism, where your political ideas are not really that well defined, and you go this way, whatever way, depending upon the circumstances. And that's how I'd characterize Donald Trump.
Yes.
When I wrote the book, Eight Ways, he was not on my radar screen in terms of a political figure then, so I didn't use him. Instead, I used Jim Webb, whom I also know, actually, for my earlier writings about women in the military. But yeah, in populists, it's typically heavily dependent upon personalities, and like Trump, to make it work. It arises when there is broad spirit discontent, usually with power in one corner. In the late 1800s, it was the lower, what I call the lower right, which was where the money is. Those are the security and prosperity folks. Whereas nowadays it's in the lower left, which is where the real coercive radicals are.
Yeah.
And so populism rises for that. So well worth it. But I think it is a more sophisticated view of things than simply saying, oh, we ought to have a monarch. And no, we don't want to be advocating that. You don't have to believe in having a monarch to be Orthodox. Monarchy is not really our thing. Order is our thing, absolutely, but not what people generally mean when they say monarchy. There are problems with that.
As you guys know, the team at Podsworth Media has worked with me for a long time producing this show. A big part of that over the past couple of years has been them using their Podsworth app to make the audio sound clean, level, professional, even when the raw recordings were super sketchy, which mine can be sometimes. In fact, this one that you're listening to right now is super sketchy. I took this microphone sock off here just to show you how crappy it will sound, except when they put it through the Podsworth app, it sounds beautiful. I've got this annoying white noise maker going on. It's driving me crazy. If you want to hear how bad this recording is before they put it through the Podsworth app, you can hear the full before and after demo for yourself at the link in the description. The app recently got a huge update, and it's better than ever. So good, in fact, that it can take almost any atrocious voice recordings and make it sound great. They remove background noise. It cuts down on plosives. It fixes clipping when your gain is too high. It reduces reverb, removes clicks, pops, improves tone, and the level of the dialogue is even and consistent. So if I move around like this, which I sometimes do when I get excited, it'll fix all of that. It's super simple. Go to podsworth.com, click Get Started, drag and drop your audio files, or open them right from your smartphone browser. Customize your settings if you want, but honestly, the default works great for most podcast recordings. Here's the cool part. Enter code BUCK50, BUCK50 for 50% off of your first order. No account needed, just email and payment. Then you get the download link in your inbox with your cleaned up files. It's perfect for podcasts, YouTube videos, sermons, homilies, audiobooks, anything like that you want to sound legitimate and professional. Remember, use code BUCK50 for half off your first order. And you're supporting this show. Thank you, guys.
One of the things that I've heard too, and I think you mentioned it earlier, it's like, sure, we have these libertarian to Orthodox pipelines, so there's political things we might ideas maybe shed or labels to shed. When you say people come to the church sometimes being too Protestant or with still sort of a Protestant phronema or worldview, what does that look like and how can that be shed?
Well, a lot happens by simply being in church and worshiping with the Orthodox. And this is a point I make regularly with my catechism seekers that come to me, is that there is nothing that can really replace the experience of worshiping with the church, living that life. That's what you're doing when you come to church and you worship in the church. You're living the life of an Orthodox Christian. And so the values, the spiritual values that is conveyed through the divine liturgy, through the people there, will transfer if you allow them to. And that will take care of a lot of things on their own. There are, of course, there are current issues that do need to be addressed more fully, because the church until now has not really had to deal with these issues. Racism is one, although the tribal temptation has always been there among all people, still facing all of us. It's just a question of who the tribe is. Could be a corporation, could be a nation, could be your family. But that's always there, except that now race is sort of an issue. Male and female is a big issue, and that needs to be explored more. And dealing with, and to bring this back to Ortho-bros, I don't find them terribly resistant to any of these things. When you teach them what we believe, and you give them better answers sometimes than pastors do. I have to say, sometimes, especially when it comes to male and female, pastors just walk a line well away from anything that might offend women, and that's a problem. Because
do you mean Protestant pastors?
No.
Even in Orthodox?
Also Orthodox.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There aren't many who are as bold as I am on this. There are some, of course, and fortunately some of them are online. You get that, but the natural tendency is for men generally to try not to say anything that will offend women, make women mad, and yet that's what a lot of young males are coming to us for, and of course it is part of the worship is it's a male-led worship. And so that, again, that truth is conveyed through the worship itself. That life, it is part of it. But instruction, a little additional instruction is of course quite helpful. There are certain practices and things just in terms of actual dress. Is that yes? You wouldn't want to dress too provocatively, too strangely. Tattoos are really not Christian. I mean, that's graffiti in the temple of God. Nobody expects you to nobody expects you to just get rid of them because you got them before you were Orthodox. But those things people realize over time. And some things, it is a matter of maturity. When I was in the Army, you'd get these young recruits say they've been boys all their life. They'd gone to school and their teachers were women, and they were, always treated as children, really. But they wanted to be men, and so they joined the Army, and they would, join the infantry. They'd join the airborne. They'd go to airborne school, and that's where I've been there. But they would these young, they want to be men, and of course that means sort of expressing their manliness. And so these young recruits would buy T-shirts that would have the airborne wings on there with instead of a parachute, there'd be a skull, and it would say "Death from Above."
Yes.
All of it. Another one was a bloody band, and they would say "War is hell, lick the blade," things like that. That's what young men do sometimes when they're just desperate to sort of shift over into something that's more serious than the boyish world they've grown up with.
That's fair.
Just wants to sanitize everything, and that's the problem. That's what a lot of people come to the Orthodox Church, because it's serious. It's serious religion, and it respects the role of the man in society much better than anything else. So they're coming to us for that seriousness, which is why you sometimes see them, now with these dark clothing and skulls and whatnot. I typically would not encourage that. I understand the appeal. It's a monastic point, except that if you look historically on Christian symbology, is that we don't make a lot of skulls. We don't want to make evil seem more powerful than it is, which is a problem with a lot of horror movies. is that they make evil seem too powerful, and that's not what we do. And it's not a dark faith. Christianity is not,
Right.
and we're not all called to be monastics. But those are the things that young men would get over quickly. They do. Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of transition from one place to another.
I think the term ortho-bro, just in my experience, has been used more so from a female perspective than a male perspective.
Oh, yeah.
What pitfalls do you see with women, I suppose of any age really, of them coming to orthodoxy? Maybe the ones that have been cradle orthodox use that term because they get scared by these young, zealous men. I don't know. But are there pitfalls you've noticed with young women, women coming to the Orthodox faith?
I don't. I just hadn't thought about it. I don't see. I think the biggest pitfall is not a problem they present, except that no one's actually taught them what the church has always taught about the role of men and women. And so they may be hearing it for the first time, some of them, first time when they hear it from me in my classes there. Because as I say, there are so many pastors, including Orthodox pastors, who really soft sell that whole issue. There are others who are bolder and plain about it. Just recently, I picked up a copy of Enduring Love by Father Josiah Trenum, in which it is surprisingly good and surprisingly sound and candid about everything, really. And yet that's something that most of the women coming into the Orthodox Church may not have been exposed to. Although they're still coming to the Orthodox Church, and the ones I'm talking about are ones coming to Roquefort. And so clearly we are among the most traditionalists. And so maybe in that sense, they're coming to us and being already willing to accept a more traditional view of male and female. And there is online, there is quite a lot of good comment from women online about the value of a more traditional understanding of male and female. I've had, since my wife died, I've had the opportunity and the inspiration to watch a lot, listen to a lot online about male-female issues, marriage and whatnot, and just reviewing my own marriage and what it meant, and of course my new life now as a widower. But I'm surprised that there are some very good voices out there. Unfortunately, I don't know of any that are, I'm sure there's some of them are Orthodox. Father Moses McPherson is worthwhile, certainly. And I'm sure there are others. But I think some of the bolder things or very valuable things I've gotten have been from non-Orthodox sources, although they are very sound about it. And Father Josiah is sound in this book about it. We do have to be careful. We don't want to just turn women off by making things sound too masculine. There has to be balance, but it has to be balance that's put rightly and that doesn't just steer clear of anything that might offend women. I've not had no woman that I've catechized has come to me and expressed any objection to anything I've said. And although I haven't dropped out, I don't see many people drop out in my courses, but it's not something that it's really been a problem. Although not as many are coming, but I think that's just because of the obvious appeal, the greater appeal of Orthodoxy in this time to men versus women. And there's so much in the church that women would like anyway. You've got fully, I make this case, and making the case for humanity as being male and female. Well, what do we see in church? Right up there in front, you have a man and a woman, a divine man and a divinized woman there, our Lord and our Lady. and they're right there beside the door is there. So, and of course, traditionally the saints on one side of the church will be female and the saints on the other side will be male. And so you get that balance within the church. And certainly I'm not saying anything that St. John Chrysostom hasn't said, and he's very good on the general issue there. So I do, of course, I do have some, I'm sure I make a point in teaching about it to teach what the church has always taught. But of course, to make it so that, and indeed, this is a good thing, and it's a good thing for both men and women. And so far, I haven't turned that I know of has not turned any women away for that. So, although obviously some that come that just still wouldn't maybe go for it anyway.
Have you run into converts, let's say men saying, "Father, I think I want to be a monk," or young women saying, I think I could be a nun, before they realize maybe what that would fully entail?
No, actually. Come to think of it, no. And one of the in the series that I teach, one is on monasticism, which generally one of the last classes there. In fact, sometimes it's just before discussing the afterlife. And I make the point that in a sense, monasticism is dying to your present life, and so as to be born again in a way. The practice of death is Plato calls philosophy, which is sort of what it means, to assume a new name and new life, and having very little to do with your previous life and what, which is why they sort of go together. But I don't get many come in seekers or catechumens already thinking that. Although some later on admit that they're somewhat drawn to monasticism, that life. One in particular is still sort of weighing that out. Right now, it's not for everybody. And I was thinking about this earlier because there is sort of a fashion of monasticism in a way, with it always has been with people sort of assuming the practices of monks. Long hair for clergy is a monastic fashion. Prayer ropes and the Jesus prayer also monastic practices.
Mm-hmm.
Not terribly common among the Orthodox till 20th century, actually, among lay people. But I think some of that is pretty superficial. Some of the monastic influence is superficial. But what it does show is the power of the witness of monks. Mm-hmm. That here are people, male or female, who take this so seriously that they're willing to live very differently and give up a lot of what the rest of us would think we would live for. Wives and children, husbands, children for women, wives for men, giving that up and then living a life of prayer and service within the church in that way. That's a powerful witness, and that's how nations are really converted. The Orthodox were very successful when we sent monks out to convert nations, because people generally can't help but respect a man or a woman who is that pious that they're willing to dedicate themselves that much, especially a man, because he has to, he's like, at least appears to be should be immune to the sexual temptation which so many men struggle with. By the way, and that's actually, of course, a big issue with young male converts there, is that, there's porn addiction.
Uh-huh.
Fortunately, there is the St. Paisius Brotherhood, founded by Father Hans Jacobsa there. Yes. But that's something I've had quite outside of even the classes I teach. Sometimes the seekers will come to me and ask for advice on it. It's a big issue, and I don't want to get into it too much. But that's something that I don't know how long that's been a real problem, but certainly with the internet, it's more of a problem than it's ever been, really, for just about everybody. Thankfully, I have to say, it's like, even now being widowed, it's as long as you're in communion, as long as you're confessing regularly, and you have the faith that we teach, and you don't want to do anything that's going to separate you from partaking the body and blood of Christ. And it makes it a lot easier to resist a lot of temptations. And that's been my experience, is that no, as long as I'm going to confession, taking communion, the thought of those other things just doesn't, I just don't go there. So anyway.
You've talked about sort of channeling the energy of the Ortho-bro, the zeal. It's nothing to be, again, stamped out or pushed away from the church. I've seen that attempted. How would you, let's say, speak to those who use the term Ortho-bro as a pejorative, who might be cradle people or are triggered by these young men coming in and they don't like what they see and they're too over the top online? Is there something to say to these people, like sort of maybe give them some caution a little bit?
Yeah, I'd tell them, you just need to get to know these people, and you need to give them a little time, because it is a part of the natural process. You come in estranged, you come in different, and then you become part of the community. And if the person matures as they should, and virtually everybody does, then things will be fine. Now, you do get some people who are problematic, and it's not really because they're Ortho-bros. It's just because they have personal problems, serious personal problems.
Yeah.
And they'll leave one way or another. They may not stop being Orthodox, but they may themselves decide that they need to go elsewhere within the Orthodox Church. And that's, I haven't seen a lot of it. I've seen a few men who were just rather difficult for their own personal reasons. And I've known two, one I catechized and one just I knew, who have left ROCOR and gone to the GOC, Genuine Orthodox Church of Greece. And in the case of the one who was, he'd started as one of my catechumens or one of my seekers. He didn't finish the course because he started talking to somebody who had been talking to a certain subdeacon whom I know and have known for years, who left ROCOR. In fact, he left the Antiochians, he left the OCA, he left ROCOR, and now he's at the GOC.
Is that schismatic, GOC?
Well, I won't get into that. I don't know exactly what the relationship is with us.
Okay.
ROCOR and GOC used to be in communion. I think actually right now it's GOC that is that says it's not in communion with us, because they condemn us for now being part of Moscow. And so we're heretics. And this certain subdeacon is pretty plain about that. And there you have a case where it's just that some people just impatient with other people. People. One thing I've learned, in writing books, writing as a journalist, trying to explain things to people, is that people cannot abide complexity. They want things simple, black and white, right and wrong. Yes. And that's why you write 8 ways. I had a terrible time. I had an agent in New York, and he shopped it to all the majors. And one, HarperCollins, was actually very interested, but they eventually ended up not going with it, because they said the marketers didn't know who to sell it to. It was too sophisticated. Mm-hmm. It didn't sing anybody's song. It just explained things in what was far more than most people would have patience for.
We don't want 8 ways. We want 2. Can't you just give us 2?
Yeah. And one of those ways has to be my way.
That's
what everybody.
I want my way and the wrong way, and I don't want all these other ones.
That's what sells books.
Yeah.
A screed from the left or a screed from the right. Well, 8 ways is not a screed. And that's why I had a hard time getting it published. But people come in like that, and they have no patience with anything but perfection. And I have to say is that I came in, and reading history, and it's like, well, then why do we have pews in the Antiochian churches? And why this, why that? It took me a while to get over that, because we don't come in as saints. We're being made saints, and it takes time, and you have to be patient, and you have to deal with people where they are, and you can't just insist that this way, it's the right way, and everybody ought to do it. And anybody who doesn't do it has just betrayed the faith. And then the legalism that gets into
Yeah.
You got too close. You stood too close to somebody of another religion in a photo. It really gets that ridiculous in terms of sometimes having anything to do with somebody who's Muslim or what. Would call into question your faithfulness to Christianity, to Christ, those they want purity. There are always those who insist on purity, expecting it of others, and they will. You don't have to worry about them because they'll leave. They may create some havoc before they do, but they'll generally take care of themselves. Because they just don't have the patience to live with other people.
Have you noticed a focus on religion in the head versus religion in the heart for newcomers?
Yes, in the sense that a lot of people this is a real difference, is that in the old days, before the internet, before Amazon, where you could just buy books all about anything, as you had to rely on what was in bookstores or libraries. And there were no books in bookstores or libraries about the Orthodox Church. You had to go to an Orthodox church to get the books. And that immediately puts you in contact with people. And you're getting your Orthodox directly from people first.
Yes.
And then the books supplement that.
Yes.
And what we're seeing now is that people are listening to lectures, deep theological lectures online, and also participating in, or at least listening into arguments online among the Orthodox or between the Orthodox and others, and so they're coming to us already knowing quite a bit about the faith. They just need to have somebody to fill in the gaps and put things into perspective, and also to emphasize the fact that it's not just what you believe. It's how you live, and which is why I repeatedly say the most important thing is pray with us, come and worship with us, live the life of the Orthodox. My classes are just a supplement to that. They don't qualify you to become Orthodox. They don't qualify you for baptism or chrismation. They just help you understand, help you along the way to becoming part of the church there. But the most important thing is the actual worship together. It heals so many wounds. This is something I've noticed. We Orthodox practice reconciliation. We practice it ritually on the Sunday of Forgiveness Sunday, just before Great Lent, where we go around and ask people for their forgiveness and grant forgiveness to people. But we also practice very practically when we, of course, go to confession there. And if you've had a difference with someone, well, then, you may be told, if you haven't already done so, is go to that person and make amends with them. So it's very much part of our faith to practice this reconciliation. And of course, it's all within the context of continuing to worship together. And so even when clergy have serious differences, difficulties with each other, as long as they keep worshiping together the way they should, a lot of those differences just fall away over time. They're easily forgiven because you're living the life together in the Spirit. And that's really what matters. It's incredibly powerful. It's really what life is all about. It's that worshiping God together. Of course, worshiping the right God, worshiping the right way, and that's all a part of it. That's all expressed. And that's the great thing about the fact that our liturgy doesn't really change. We might add things, but we almost never take anything away, and don't really change much. But it provides that permanence that as long as we keep doing this, of course, we need to pay attention sometimes now to some things that haven't gotten a lot of attention in the past. That's in terms of, yes, male and female issues, things like that that the church is now having to deal with that it never had to deal with before. Before it was obvious that men and women are different, and now we have to defend that. And you have people saying, well, no, we're just supposed to be human persons. What? What's that? That's another subject maybe we can talk about.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I think we could do multiple episodes on that. Protodeacon Patrick, in closing, you kind of done it. I'm so you've piqued my curiosity more than you even did initially. Plug your books again if you'd like to, or really plug anything you'd like.
Well, this one, and everybody should read this one. Okay, Christ is Truth, Truth is Christ. It's available on Amazon. It's on $15. It's not a big book, but there's a lot in here. A lot of information, a lot of good argument. I should also show, well, gee, I've got several here. Well, here's my doctoral dissertation. If you're interested, this is a scholar.
Oh, yeah.
It's a doctoral dissertation, but it's written by a writer, a professional writer and editor. So it's well written and easy to read, well as any academic work could be, better than most. But anyway, very important. I have to say, it's like if you hadn't read this book, then a lot of people aren't really qualified to talk about male and female. I mean, I'm sure that people believe a lot of what's in there, but at least scholars should not be writing about, Orthodox scholars should not be writing about male and female unless they've read this book. Let me say that.
And for those just listening and not watching, it's called Origen's Revenge.
Yes. Origen's Revenge, the Greek and Hebrew roots of Christian thinking on male and female.
Yes.
And then I also have this. This is my master's thesis, The Disappearing Deaconess. If that's at all of interest to you, it explains why we had deaconesses and why we don't anymore. Also very good, and also a very small book. Partly small because there weren't a lot of deaconesses, and we don't know a lot about them because their role was extremely limited. But this, I think, is the best thing published in terms of explaining that. There is a bigger book published by a Roman Catholic authority. It's a lot to get into, and I think this actually distills what he says in a better way, and then also integrates my own research on the matter. 8 Ways is still available. As I say, this is 8 Ways around the country. It's available online. It's also available on Kindle. And that might be worthwhile. Oh, and I have a novel.
Oh,
yeah. Right after converting, I wrote a novel about the Great Persecution. It's very long, very small print, 200,000 words. Romance, epic romance.
A Crown of Life, I believe.
Crown
yes.
of Life.
Okay.
A novel of the Great Persecution. There's some people who really love this. My wife really loved it.
Oh.
And in fact, she was after me for years to get it published. Literally, it was in my basement for 10 years. And she cornered me with 2 friends who'd read it and loved it. And finally did it, finally put it out there. Yes, there are people who really love this book. It's, of course, not everybody's cup of tea, but it's an epic romance with everything you'd expect, although no explicit sex in there.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I've just recently learned that a lot of female fiction nowadays is just basically pornography.
Yeah.
I did not know that. So you won't find that in this. But it is, for some people, a great read. I think it's pretty good too. Yeah, anyway, so that's it. My website, brianpatrickmitchell.com, has these books shown as well as the books on women in the military. brianpatrickmitchell.com. I don't blog a lot, only occasionally, so you won't be bothered by notices. I'm terrible at marketing, really, but I do have some things that I make available to people. Otherwise, I'd say just in, the bottom line on Ortho-bros is that it's really a cause for celebration that we're getting so many people in as they are, and young men, because you can't expect women to save us. Unfortunately, especially when it comes to the issue of male and female, a lot of men want to leave it up to the women to correct the thinking on that, whereas it's really the job of men to do the leading. And my own view is that if you bring the men in and you give them the instruction that they need, a lot of their rougher edges will rub off in time. They'll mature, and they'll be the leaders of the next generation. And that's a good thing. Yes. Thank God.
Amen. Protodeacon Patrick, thank you for being here on Counterflow, sir.
No, thank you. Hope to see you again.
I hope you guys got a lot out of that discussion. What a man. What a guest. I will definitely need to be getting him back on the show because we could have gone off in so many directions. and gone astray from our original topic because he's quite knowledgeable, obviously. Next week, it's going to be a very good one. Orthodox friend of mine, she was never adopted, spent all of her entire childhood up till she was 18 in the foster care system. You think that's a good system? You're about to find out some crazy things that are done to foster children and in orphanages and whatnot. So stay tuned for that one next week. As for this show, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you'd like, please. It helps. And give us a review if you'd like on the podcast channel. Did I say that right? You guys know what I'm talking about. Follow me on X at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. And we shall talk soon. Have a good one.
Like the sound of the Counterflow Podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.